Everyone saw the bruises on my daughter's head, but no one asked why. It wasn't just any bruise. It was the kind of injury that echoed with violence, the kind that left silence in its wake. But in the quiet cul-de-sac of Hillside Oaks, silence was their favorite defense. We had just moved in, full of hope, of dreams, of believing this would be our family's fresh start. I should have seen the storm behind their smiles. Rachel and I had worked years to save for this home. We weren't rich, we were determined. We wanted Emily, our 6-year-old daughter with cerebral palsy, to have a life filled with light and laughter. She couldn't run like other kids. But her spirit? It soared higher than anyone's I knew. Her smile alone could calm a room. Her laughter was music. And Hillside Oaks had promised safety, community, peace. What we got was Brenda Millstone, the HOA president. The woman neighbors whispered about behind her back. They called her Karen, but none of them dared say it to her face. The first time we met her, Rachel and I were kneeling in the soil, planting Emily's favorite sunflowers under the front window. Brenda didn't say hello. She didn't even ask our names. She pointed at the ramp we'd built for Emily's wheelchair and said, "That won't be approved by the board. You'll need to remove it." Rachel looked up, calm, composed. "It's for our daughter," she said. "She needs it." Brenda's gaze shifted coldly past us to the porch, where Emily sat, playing with her dolls, legs folded gently, her head tilted to the sun. That's when Brenda said it. Maybe this isn't the right neighborhood for that kind of child. That kind of child. I swallowed a response that burned in my throat like fire. I bit my tongue because we'd only just moved in. Because I didn't want war. But that moment carved a scar into my soul. The violations started small. A note in our mailbox about the ramp not matching the trim paint. A warning about Emily's walker left beside the porch. Another about children's toys visible from the sidewalk. Emily's dolls, her playhouse. The things that made our home. Hers, now deemed a disruption to neighborhood aesthetic. I tried to reason with Brenda at a barbecue. She looked at me like I was trying to sell snake oil. "Rules exist for a reason," she said with a half smile that felt like a slap. "We can't make special exceptions for feelings." Rachel tried too. She went to the HOA meeting, showed them Emily's medical notes, photos, everything. Brenda sat with her folder of time-stamped images of our house, clicking her pen like a gavel. "This isn't personal," she said. "It's procedural." But it was personal. It was always personal. The next week, a man showed up outside our house. Clipboard, camera. He was taking photos of our home, of Emily. I stepped out. "Can I help you?" He mumbled about being an HOA representative and disappeared down the street. Emily had just been sitting in the grass. That night, I stood in Brenda's driveway and told her to leave my child out of this. "She's not a threat to your grass," I said. Her arms crossed. "Then maybe teach her to stay off my lawn and we wouldn't be having this conversation." I walked away before the rage swallowed me whole. Then came the day everything changed. It was sunny. Rachel was inside folding. Laundry. Emily wanted ice cream. I lifted her gently into the passenger seat, secured her seatbelt, folded the wheelchair into the trunk. I turned to open the driver's side door, and that's when I heard the tires. Brenda's car came screeching into the cul-de-sac, blocking us in. She flung open her door, marched toward us, yelling about Emily stepping on her lawn. I glanced at the pavement. Emily had barely crossed the sidewalk. "She's 6, I said, standing in front of the car. And she was on the pavement. "She's a nuisance," Brenda shouted. "She's ruining my property with her wheels and her screaming." I turned to Emily. Her face was pale, confused, scared. "Leave us alone," I said. Then Brenda did. Something I'll never forget. She walked to the passenger side door. I thought she was just going to yell more, until she ripped the door open, screamed, "Get out of this neighborhood, you little..." and slammed it shut with all her strength. Onto Emily's head. The crack echoed through the air, a sickening, wet sound, followed by silence. Then a thud. Time froze. I flung the door open and my daughter slumped, blood dripping down her temple. Unconscious. Rachel ran outside, screaming. Brenda stood frozen, wide-eyed but silent. "Call an ambulance," Rachel cried. I didn't wait. I drove, tires digging trenches in her precious lawn. I didn't see stop signs. I didn't hear the sirens. Just my daughter's breathless body, my own heart begging for her to open her eyes. She didn't. At the hospital, everything blurred. White walls, blue gloves, monitors. My world tilted. Doctors came and went. Machines beeped like Morse code. From hell. And then the words I feared most. She's in a coma, the doctor said. A traumatic brain injury. We've stabilized her, but we don't know what the long-term damage may be. I collapsed. Rachel sobbed beside me. And Brenda, she sat on her porch the next morning, coffee in hand, waving at neighbors as if nothing happened. Everyone kept saying the same thing. Time will tell. But time wasn't telling us anything. It just kept dragging on, slow and cruel, as my little girl lay unconscious in a hospital bed too big for her small frame. Her head was wrapped in gauze. Machines hissed beside her like whispers from another world. And every beep, every flash of green light was a reminder of the moment that should have never happened. The moment that woman, that monster, slammed a car door onto my child's head. We didn't sleep, not really. Rachel sat by Emily's side, brushing her fingers gently across our daughter's knuckles, whispering stories, songs, anything to keep herself from falling apart. I spent most nights in the hallway, pacing, waiting, breaking. The pediatric ICU is a strange place. It's too clean, too quiet. You start to hate the silence. You start to fear the sound of shoes in the hallway, thinking it's a doctor bringing worse news, or maybe no news at all, which sometimes feels worse. I gave my full statement to the police the next morning. Officer Grant stood there with his notepad, expressionless. She blocked the car, I told him, came around the passenger, sighed and slammed the door on Emily's head. She screamed at her first. It wasn't an accident. He nodded slowly. Too slowly. We'll open an investigation, he said, and take it from there. That phrase felt like acid in my ears. Take it from there? My daughter was in a coma. I leaned forward. You're not arresting her? That was an assault. Attempted murder. Officer Grant sighed. Without proof of intent, we can't make that call. Mrs. Millstone says it was an accident. Claims your daughter startled her. She looked right at her. She screamed at her before she did it. She denies that. He replied blandly. We'd need corroborating statements or footage to proceed further. Rachel nearly lunged at him. A nurse had to hold her back, and honestly, I didn't blame her. I've never seen her like that before, and shaking, eyes full of rage and heartbreak. That's when it hit me. The system wasn't broken. It was built exactly like this. Built to delay, to doubt, to drown you in process while the powerful keep smiling on their porches, hiding behind policies and procedure. Brenda wasn't just evil, she was untouchable, and she knew it. Because that same day, while our daughter clung to life, someone, probably Brenda herself, left an HOA notice on our front door. I remember standing in the kitchen of our empty house, holding that letter in my hands with disbelief. It claimed we had engaged in aggressive behavior, public endangerment, and hostile conduct during an HOA interaction. The incident where Brenda assaulted Emily, now reframed as us being the threat. They were building their defense before we'd even had a chance to breathe. And then it got worse. A photo appeared on the Hillside Oaks Facebook page. Brenda's arm, faintly bruised, with a caption, "Some people just don't belong in this community. I was attacked today. Prayers appreciated. Please be kind." The comments rolled in. "So sorry, Brenda, you're so strong. Don't let bullies push you around." Sounds like someone's trying to sue the HOA for money. Rachel saw it before I did. She stood there shaking, her hands balled into fists, tears running down her face. "They believe her," she whispered. "They really believe her." No, not everyone. They couldn't all be blind. I went to the store that night for some clothes and supplies, and ran into Mrs. Bachum, one of the board members. I asked her straight up, "Do you believe Emily got hurt by accident?" She looked at me the same way Brenda did. Polite, controlled, and completely cold. "It's a tragedy," she said. But Brenda's served this community with distinction for 8 years. There's no proof, is there? I wanted to scream. Proof? My daughter's skull was fractured. That's when I called an attorney. His name was Marcus Hale. Civil rights. Litigator. Tough, sharp, known for taking on institutions that thought they were untouchable. I met him in a small office near downtown. I handed him every photo, every citation, every statement I'd given. The ER report. Brenda's HOA letters. Everything. He read it quietly, then leaned back in his chair. This is horrifying, he said. But criminal charges won't stick without video or a third-party witness. Civil, though? You've got a case for negligence, harassment, maybe even intentional harm. I nodded, but it wasn't enough. I didn't want a payout. I wanted justice. The next morning, I went back to the neighborhood to grab some clothes. As I pulled into the driveway, there she was, Brenda, sitting on her porch, watering flowers. Like nothing had happened. She looked up at me, smiled. Hope your daughter's all right, she said, holding her coffee. Accidents are so tragic. I nearly dropped my keys. You think this is over? I said. She tilted her head. I have no idea what you mean, but if you threaten me again, I'll be forced to report it. Again. She walked back inside, calm, controlled, as if she hadn't fractured a child's skull 5 days earlier. When I returned to my car, I saw it. Another citation on the windshield. Unauthorized parking, obstructing pedestrian access. They were playing games, mocking us, layering their cruelty beneath fake concern. Back at the hospital, Rachel and I barely spoke. Not because we were angry, but because there were no words left. We sat in silence, taking shifts by Emily's bedside, reading her books, playing her music, hoping, praying that something would reach her. The nurses told us sometimes coma patients respond to familiar voices, that maybe somehow she could hear us. We told her stories about her dolls, her favorite wind spinner, about the sunflowers we planted outside. On the 5th night, something changed. I was in the hallway getting coffee when Rachel came running out of the room, shaking. Look at this, she said, holding a piece of paper. It was handwritten, barely legible, folded twice, slipped under the hospital door sometime during the night. I saw what happened. Meet me behind the community center. After sunset. Come alone. Don't tell anyone. There was no name, no signature, just an address and a time. I looked at Rachel. She was terrified, but her eyes held something else. Hope. So I went. That evening, I parked down the street and walked. Behind the community center, heart hammering. It was quiet. A soft breeze blew through the hedges. And there, half in shadow, stood someone I hadn't expected. Mr. Alvarez, 2 doors down from us, retired, quiet. His wife was on the board. He looked scared. His hands trembled. I didn't want to get involved, he said quickly. My wife, she begged me not to. I stepped forward. Did you see it? He nodded. All of it. You saw Brenda hit Emily with the door? She didn't trip. She didn't fall. Brenda slammed it. Hard. And she looked around first. Checked if anyone was watching. I saw it all. I didn't know what to do. My knees nearly gave out. I can't go public, he whispered. But I have this. He reached into his coat and pulled out a flash drive. I have cameras on my roof. Brenda doesn't know. I checked the footage. It's all there. I took it. My hands, shaking. Thank you, I whispered. You just saved her. That night, I sat in the hospital waiting room and watched the video on Rachel's old laptop. It showed everything. Brenda blocking the car. The argument. The moment she walked to the passenger side, screamed, looked around, and then slammed the door with all her force onto Emily's head. The scream, Rachel running, me yelling. It was all there. I sent it to Marcus immediately. He called me minutes later, voice low and fierce. This changes everything. Then he said something that finally made my breath catch. "This needs to go public," I hesitated. "You mean leak it?" "If Brenda can use the HOA to smear your name, the only leverage we have now is the court of public opinion. You want justice? Turn the lights on." I looked at Rachel. She nodded through tears, and that night I uploaded the clip. Simple title, HOA President Attacks Disabled Child with Car Door. I posted it on parenting forums, disability groups, a few local threads. Didn't expect what happened next. The video had barely been online 12 hours, and already 200,000 people had watched it. By sunrise, it had crossed 1 million. I stared at the screen in disbelief, watching the numbers climb like a ticking clock, each view a pulse of justice. Comments flooded in like a tsunami. "This makes me sick. I hope that little girl pulls through. Press charges. This woman needs to be in prison. Now." People weren't just watching. They were feeling. Outraged, heartbroken, furious. And suddenly, we weren't just another family being crushed by an HOA board. We were a national story. It went viral the moment a mother from Florida reposted the clip with 5 haunting words. "This could have been my baby." That tweet alone racked up 2 million shares in a day. Suddenly, the story wasn't just ours. It belonged to every family with a disabled child, every parent who'd been silenced, every victim of cruelty wrapped in neighborhood policy. I sat beside Emily's hospital bed while the world lit up around us. Rachel hadn't slept in 2 days. She kept brushing Emily's hair back and whispering, "The world sees you now, baby." "They see you." And then my phone buzzed. "Marcus." "The DA just called me," he said without greeting. "They've reopened the case." I blinked. "Are they arresting her?" "They're applying for a warrant right now. That video is undeniable." She looked around before she did it. You could hear the scream, the impact. It's all there. They're moving fast. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Across town, it was unraveling. Brenda's pristine lawn, once her fortress, was now surrounded by angry neighbors and media vans. Local reporters were camped outside her house. Protesters held signs, "Not in our community. Protect children, not power. Justice for Emily." One neighbor live-streamed the entire scene like it was a reality show villain's lair. Thousands of people tuned in to watch Brenda's house, to watch her world collapse. Inside the HOA board, panic set in. Someone, we still don't know who, began leaking internal emails to Marcus's office. And what those emails revealed was more than just apathy. It was cruelty. Brenda had referred to disability access ramps as visual pollution, called our daughter an eyesore, wrote things like, "Families with complicated needs attract lawsuits. They threaten neighborhood stability." When Rachel read those words, she collapsed into my arms. "They saw her as a violation," she whispered. "Not a child." The public backlash was instant and brutal. National news picked up the story. Every headline used the same phrase. HOA President assaults disabled child. Reporters begged for interviews. We declined. Not because we didn't have something to say, but because Emily still lay silent, tubes in her throat, her heart beating only because of machines. Instead, I wrote a statement. I wrote it sitting by her bedside, her hand in mine, as the machines hummed around us. My daughter Emily is not a violation. She is not an eyesore. She is a 6-year-old girl who loves sunflowers, bedtime stories, and the wind in her hair when her wheelchair rolls fast down a hill. She did nothing wrong. We're not seeking fame. We're seeking justice. For her, and for every family who's been told to stay quiet. This isn't about HOA rules. It's about humanity. That statement was shared over 3 million times, and the letters started pouring in. Children from across the country sent cards. Teachers mailed drawings from entire classrooms. Stuffed animals, sunflower pins, even hand-sewn dolls arrived at the hospital front desk, addressed to Emily, the girl with the strongest smile in the world. One night, a nurse walked in carrying a shoebox. Inside were handmade bracelets, one for Emily, one for me, and one for Rachel. Each one had a single word stitched in tiny black beads. Unbreakable. Marcus called again 2 days later. "They filed the charges," he said. First-degree aggravated assault, child endangerment, obstruction. My hands were shaking. Did they arrest her? Not yet, he said. She's not answering the door. Brenda had gone dark. No one had seen her leave the house. Her car was still parked in the driveway. Her windows were shuttered. But her silence said everything. She knew it was over, or at least she thought she could hide until it passed. But on the third morning, justice came knocking. At 9:42 a.m., patrol cars pulled up to her property. Officers approached the door. Body cams rolling, news vans filming from the sidewalk. The live stream ran uninterrupted. She came out in a bathrobe, sunglasses, screaming about slander and conspiracy. "You're arresting me?" she shrieked. "I'm the president of this neighborhood. I am this community." But the officers didn't flinch. They read her rights. They cuffed her hands, and the image that hit every screen across America was unforgettable. Brenda Millstone. Once the tyrant of Hillside Oaks, pressed against the backseat window of a police cruiser, screaming as the world watched her fall. That night, I sat by Emily's side and held her hand while Rachel cried silently next to me. Not tears of pain this time, but something closer to peace. Not relief, not yet. But the first breath of air after being underwater for too long, but it wasn't over, not even close. The HOA board scrambled. They tried to issue a formal statement, calling Brenda's arrest deeply regrettable and under internal review. But the community wasn't having it. A petition circled, thousands signed, demanding not just Brenda's removal, but the resignation of the entire board. Protesters gathered outside the HOA office. One night, someone graffitied the words, "Shame lives here," on the side of the Hillside Oaks Community Center. They tried to paint over it, but it kept coming back, in chalk, in stickers, on posters. It became the movement's rallying cry. Shame lives here. Marcus forwarded more emails. Board members now scrambling to distance themselves from Brenda. One of them wrote, "If she goes down, we all go down." They were right, because this wasn't just about one woman anymore. It was about a system that thought rules were more important than children. That silence could bury truth. That appearance mattered more than humanity. The story spread like wildfire. Talk shows covered it, disability advocates shared it, celebrities reposted Emily's story with hashtags like Sharks Justice for Emily and Sharks No More Karens. The Wamidi fund Marcus set up, quietly at first, grew overnight. Donations from strangers covered Emily's mounting medical bills. Some wrote with their donations, "For the Sunflower Girl. Keep fighting. For the child who made me cry in my kitchen. I was her once. Thank you for speaking out." In a world where cruelty so often wins, something had finally shifted. And then, the breakthrough we'd been waiting for. It happened on a Monday morning. I was sitting by Emily's bedside, whispering one of her favorite stories. The Girl Who Danced with Stars. Rachel had gone to shower. The machines beeped rhythmically, and then I saw it, a twitch, her eyelid, just once. Almost nothing. I froze, heart pounding, then it happened again. I leaned in. "Emily," I whispered, "baby, if you can hear me, squeeze Daddy's hand." Seconds passed, and then the faintest pressure. A flutter of her pinky finger against my palm. It wasn't much, but it was everything. I shouted for the nurse. Rachel came running. The doctors confirmed what we already knew in our hearts. She was still there. Emily was still fighting. Brenda had tried to silence her, but she couldn't. Not forever. We didn't know how long it would take, or how complete her recovery would be. But for the first time in weeks, hope didn't feel like a lie. We weren't alone anymore. We had an army behind us. Millions who'd seen the truth. A prosecutor ready to go to war. A judge who wouldn't bend to HOA politics. And a little girl who refused to let cruelty win. I kissed Emily's forehead that night, then whispered, "You've already won more battles than most warriors, sweetheart. And we're not stopping now." Outside the window, the first light of morning broke through. The clouds, the world was watching, and we were ready. The first thing I brought into the courtroom wasn't evidence. It was Emily's empty wheelchair. I placed it beside Rachel in the front row, right where the jury could see it. Every time they looked forward, they'd see not just a seat with wheels, but the space where a little girl should be. The trial wasn't just about facts. It was about memory, about pain, about justice echoing down sterile hospital hallways and through oak-paneled courtrooms. And I wasn't just a father anymore. I was also the lead federal prosecutor appointed to try the case. Yes, the world didn't know until now, but I'd held my identity back until I couldn't any longer. The Department of Justice had quietly stepped in when the hate crime charges were added. And when they asked if I wanted to lead, I didn't hesitate. This wasn't just another file on a desk. This was my child. Brenda Millstone sat across the courtroom in a navy suit, pale, lips tight. No smug smile this time. Her hands were clenched. In her lap. Her lawyer whispered constantly in her ear, but her eyes kept darting. To the crowd, to the press, to the jurors, and to me. The judge was Claudia Henley. Stern, sharp, and known for having zero tolerance for cruelty disguised as order. As she took her seat, you could feel the air tighten, and then it began. Opening statements. I stood, every word heavy with purpose. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I began, this is not a case about a homeowner dispute. This is not about landscaping or rule violations. This is about power, and how one woman believed she had the right to decide who belongs in a community. I paused. Let the silence burn. But most importantly, this case is about a little girl named Emily, who cannot walk, who cannot testify, who cannot tell you what happened, because she is in a coma. And the person responsible for that sits right there. I pointed at Brenda. I didn't yell. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The truth didn't need volume. Brenda's attorney started with deflection. Claimed it was a tragic misunderstanding. That Brenda had been under emotional distress. That she had momentarily lost awareness of the child's proximity. That her own safety felt threatened. It was the first time I'd ever heard someone try to spin slamming a car door onto a child's skull, but the jury wasn't buying it. Not with what we had. First, we played the footage. The courtroom went silent as the video rolled, Brenda blocking the car, screaming, walking toward the passenger door, checking her surroundings, then slamming it with full force. Emily's scream, Rachel, running, my voice breaking. You could feel the moment the jury stopped doubting. It was no longer a story. It was reality. Then came Mr. Alvarez. He stepped forward, cleared his throat, and delivered what would become the turning point of the trial. I saw her do it, he said. And I saw her look around first. She knew what she was doing. It wasn't a reaction. It was rage, and she aimed it at that child. Why didn't you come forward earlier? The defense lawyer asked. He looked down. Because she controls everything. The board, the citations, the neighbors, but not anymore. More witnesses followed. Neighbors who had been fined for ramps, for toys, for speaking up. A teenage girl testified Brenda once told her, that crippled kid is ruining our property values. It shocked even me. We presented Brenda's own emails. Those cold lines calling Emily a disruption, calling our medical accommodations visual pollution, mocking Rachel's tears after a board meeting. Brenda's defense team tried to push a narrative of mental instability. Stress, exhaustion, they tried sympathy. They tried pity. But they had one problem. The truth. And the truth was loud now. It was on screens, in courtrooms, in every heartbeat that pounded in my chest as I stared at the woman who thought she could crush a child and walk away. The trial stretched into its second week. Each day I came in early. Each day I touched Emily's wheelchair before stepping into the courtroom. It reminded me why I was there, and then it was time for closing arguments. I stood before the jury, no notes, just the weight of everything that had happened. This isn't just about what she did, I said. It's about why she did it. About a woman who saw a little girl and chose to see a threat instead of a child. About a system that backed her, until the world saw the truth. I stepped closer. My daughter can't stand today. She can't speak. But her silence speaks louder than anything I could say. And I ask you, not as a lawyer, not even as a father, but as a human being, please give her justice. I sat down, and I felt Rachel's fingers lace into mine. We waited. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. 4 long, endless hours. I didn't pace. I didn't move. I sat beside the empty chair where Emily should have been. I stared at the seal above the judge's bench. I stared at Brenda's cold profile. And then, the knock on the door. The verdict was in. Everyone stood. The jury filed in. The foreman stood, voice calm, steady. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty on all counts. Rachel broke down. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stared ahead as Brenda slumped in her seat, mouth open, face pale. Her hands trembled. Reporters exploded into whispers. The judge banged her gavel. And then came the sentencing hearing. Brenda's attorneys begged for leniency, first offense. Community ties. Mental health claims. I stepped forward with one last move. One I hadn't told even Rachel about. I played a video, footage from Emily's hospital room, her tiny hand twitching, her eyelids fluttering, her mother whispering to her, "You're not alone." The judge watched in silence. When the screen went dark, she looked directly at Brenda. "You didn't just harm a child," she said. "You tried to erase a life. I sentence you to 85 years in a maximum security prison. No possibility of early release." The gasp was audible. Brenda screamed as officers grabbed her. "I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to." But it was too late. She was already gone. That night, the headlines burned across the world. HOA president. Sentenced to 85 years for assault on disabled child. Justice for Emily. But it wasn't just justice. It was something bigger. It was a movement. Letters poured in. Donations surged. Parents of children with disabilities sent photos, stories. Support. The HOA board crumbled. 4 members resigned. 1 fled the state. The community voted to dissolve the HOA completely. In its place, they built something new. A neighborhood council built on inclusion, not control. And Emily, my little warrior, she kept fighting. Her doctors said her brain activity was rising. Her body was still, but her eyes fluttered more. Her fingers twitched. Some nights, I could have sworn I heard her whisper. Rachel believed it too. We never left her side. Never stopped speaking. Never stopped hoping. And late, one night, just as the last camera truck rolled out of our street, Emily's eyes opened. She blinked. Just once. But in a room where every second had been defined by stillness, that single flutter of her eyes felt like thunder. Rachel gasped. "Emily?" she whispered, stepping closer, her voice trembling like she was afraid to believe what she saw. Another blink. Then, her lips parted. A faint whisper. So soft we almost missed it. "Mommy?" Rachel collapsed into sobs, gripping our daughter's tiny fingers like they were lifelines. I stood frozen for a moment, unable to move, the word echoing in my ears like a bell ringing through fog. She was back. Not fully. Not yet. But she was there. The nurses came rushing in, tears in their eyes too. One of them, Dana, who'd been with us since the first night, cupped her hands over her mouth. "I told you," she said through quiet weeping. "I told you sometimes they come back." The ICU transformed that night. The harsh beeping of machines became the background music to hope. Her doctors gathered with new expressions, cautious, measured, but filled with something we hadn't seen in weeks. Possibility. Emily couldn't talk much. Her voice was a whisper. Her eyes drifted. In and out. She couldn't move her legs. She had no memory of the attack, but she knew us. She reached for Rachel. She squeezed my hand. She smiled. Weak, crooked, but real. And for a few hours that night, we allowed ourselves to dream again. Brenda was gone. Justice had been served. But the damage she left behind, that would take far longer to heal. Physical therapy started. On day 4 after she woke. Emily hated it. The bright rooms, the forced movements, the strangers asking her to push, stretch, repeat. She cried often, clenched her jaw, refused to look at mirrors. The trauma was there, even if the memory wasn't. She didn't ask why her head was wrapped in gauze. She didn't ask why she couldn't walk. But sometimes, when she stared out the window too long, I could tell. She knew something had happened. She just didn't have the words yet, and maybe that was for the best. We didn't speak her name, Brenda, not in that room, not in front of Emily. We turned down every interview, every book deal, every podcast request. This wasn't a victory. Laptown. This was our life. One evening, as I wheeled Emily through the hospital garden, we passed another family. A boy, maybe 8 or 9, sat in a chair like hers. His mom held a sunflower. He looked at Emily and smiled. "Cool wheels," he said. Emily didn't respond right away. But then, she smiled back. It was the first time I saw that light. Again. That spark. The one I thought we'd lost the moment Brenda ripped the door open. That night, Rachel and I sat in the dim hospital lounge and talked quietly for the first time in what felt like years. "I want to go back," she said suddenly. Turned to her. "What?" "To the neighborhood. I want Emily to see our home, her sunflower bed, her spinner on the porch. I want her to know it's still hers." I didn't answer right away, because a part of me hated that street, hated those sidewalks, hated every fake smile that watched us suffer and said nothing. But Rachel was right. We couldn't let Brenda's shadow win, so we went back. 2 weeks after the sentencing. Emily in her chair. Bandages off, but still healing. We pulled into our driveway just as the sun dipped behind the rooftops. The neighborhood was different now. Quieter, softer. No HOA signs, no board notices. The community center's shame lives. Here, graffiti had been replaced with a mural, painted by local kids, of sunflowers and smiling faces. A banner stretched above it. "We're still growing." Emily looked at it as we passed. "Those are my flowers," she whispered. We nodded. "Yes," Rachel said gently. "They're yours." Our lawn had been mowed. Our porch had been swept. Someone, maybe Mr. Alvarez, had repainted the ramp. Everything was waiting for her. Emily wheeled up to the spinner. It turned slowly in the breeze. She reached out and touched it, then smiled. "Spin faster," she said. I gave it a hard push, and it twirled like it was dancing. Rachel cried silently behind her. That night, we tucked Emily into her own bed for the first time since the attack. She clutched her sunflower doll close to her chest. I sat beside her, reading softly from The Girl Who Danced with Stars. Halfway through, she reached for my hand. "Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart." "Am I broken?" The words cut like knives. I looked at her, that small, brave face. The gauze long gone, but the scar still faint above her temple. I shook my head. "No, baby. You're not broken. You're braver than anyone I've ever known. But I can't run anymore." I took a breath. Maybe not yet. Maybe not the way you used to. But you're still you. The girl who spins flowers. Who tells the best bedtime stories. Who made the whole world stop and care. She looked down at her hands. "Brenda was mean," she whispered. It was the first time she'd said her name. I nodded slowly. Yes, she was. "Is she gone?" I hesitated, then nodded again. "She can't hurt you anymore." Emily closed her eyes, not out of fear, but like she was filing that truth away somewhere safe. Rachel and I stepped out of the room and held each other until our knees gave out. We didn't need revenge anymore. We had healing. The community changed after that. The families who once stayed, silent now organized. They started support networks, playgroups, accessibility committees. People we never spoke to showed up with casseroles, with offers to help, to listen, to learn. The house across from ours was sold to a single dad raising a son with Down syndrome. On their first day, Emily waved from our porch. He waved back. The whole street waved. We weren't alone anymore. And the neighborhood, the one that once tried to erase her, now carried her story like a badge of honor. At a town council meeting 3 months later, I spoke publicly for the first time, not as a prosecutor, not even as a father, just as a man who'd watched a broken system try to bury the most innocent thing in his life, and fail. I used to think laws alone were enough, I told them, but what we needed wasn't just policy. It was empathy, community, accountability. You can't build that with fences and fines. You build it by choosing to care. The room stood in silence. Then, applause. Not thunderous, just sincere, like the sound of something slowly healing. After the meeting, a woman approached us. She was trembling. Her voice cracked. My daughter is autistic. Brenda tried to fine us for the sensory lights on her room window. She looked at Emily, then at us. I'm so sorry I didn't speak up sooner. Rachel hugged her. No words needed. That summer, we started a nonprofit in Emily's name, one that helps families in HOA communities protect their rights, navigate legal threats, and document abuse. We called it Sunflowers Still Bloom, because they do, even after storms, even after the dark, even after someone tries to tear them from the ground. They bloom, just like her. When Emily wheeled into her school for the first time since the attack, the entire hallway went silent. Not because anyone told them to, but because they felt it. It wasn't just a return. It was a reckoning. Children stood frozen beside lockers. Teachers wiped tears they weren't expecting. Some of her classmates reached out, whispering her name like it was sacred. Emily. She waved shyly, her hand barely lifting. And then someone stepped forward. A boy named Malik. He'd been her reading buddy before it all happened. Quiet, reserved, never spoke much. But this time, he stepped right up to her wheelchair and bent down to her level. I kept your book safe, he said, holding up a crumpled copy of The Girl Who Danced with Stars. I read it every week, just in case you came back. Emily stared at it, then smiled, and that was all it took. The hallway erupted into cheers, not loud or chaotic, but full of relief, the kind only a child can carry, the kind that says, "We missed you," without needing to say anything at all. Rachel stood beside me, eyes glistening. She's stronger than we ever were, she whispered. I nodded, my throat tight. But not everything was easy. Not every child knew what to say. Some stared too long. Some asked questions too loudly. Why does her face look different? Why can't she walk right? Is her brain broken now? One kid muttered weirdo under his breath. I saw Emily's face freeze. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But later that day, after the house was quiet and the dishes were done, she wheeled into the living room with a question. Daddy? Yeah, love? Why do some people forget how to be nice? I paused. That's a hard question, I said. But maybe it's because no one ever taught them that kindness is louder than cruelty. She looked at me for a long moment. Then nodded. Can I teach them? I knelt beside her, tears already building. Sweetheart, you already are. That night, I found her in her room surrounded by construction paper and markers. She was making cards, not for herself, but for other kids like her. Each one had a hand-drawn sunflower and a phrase she came up with on her own. You are not weird. You are wonderful. We helped her print 50 of them, then 100, then 1,000. We mailed them to hospitals, therapy centers, parents who'd written to us from across the country. Kids started writing back. One from Oregon. I got made. Fun of for my braces. Your card made me feel better. Another from Georgia. I don't talk good, but my mom read me your card and I felt brave. It grew into something we didn't expect. Emily's story wasn't just about tragedy anymore. It was about permission. Permission to be different, to be heard, to fight back with gentleness, and survive with grace. One weekend, we took Emily to a key local community center where a disability advocacy group had set up an event in her honor. They called it the Sunflower Circle. Families came from other towns. Kids rolled beside walkers and held stuffed animals and wore shirts with Emily's name drawn in glitter. When we arrived, they formed a path, a long line of children holding paper sunflowers. And Emily? She froze at the entrance. "I can't," she whispered. Rachel bent down. "Why, baby?" "What if they're looking at me?" "Because I'm different now." I knelt on the other side. "They're not looking at you because you're different," I said. "They're looking at you because you gave them hope." Emily's hands trembled on her chair's arms. Then she rolled forward, and as she passed, each child held up their sunflower and whispered, "Thank you, Emily." She didn't say anything, but I saw it in her eyes, the moment she began to own her story. That night, after we got home, she asked to watch the video. The one that changed everything. I hesitated. I wasn't ready. I didn't know if she was. But she insisted. "I want to see what happened. I need to know." So we did. We muted the sound. We let her sit in silence, watching as the woman who once ruled the neighborhood with plastic fences and fake smiles revealed who she really was. Emily didn't look away. She didn't cry. When it ended, she turned to me. She was really mad at me. "She was wrong," I said. "Not mad. Cruel. And cruelty is loud when love doesn't speak." Emily stared at the screen a little longer, then closed the laptop. "I forgive her," Rachel gasped softly. "You... what?" "I forgive her," Emily said again, "not because she deserves it, but because I don't want to carry her anger anymore." I felt something in my chest break open. Not from sadness, from awe. My daughter, the girl who almost didn't survive, was teaching the world how to let go, and from that moment on, everything changed. She started therapy with more energy. Her speech returned faster, her body grew stronger. Not fully, but enough. One day, she stood up with help for the first time since the coma. It lasted 6 seconds, but she did it. Rachel collapsed into a chair, weeping with pride. The therapist clapped. Emily just smiled and said, "One day I'm gonna run again, but today I stood." That became our family's motto, not revenge, not justice, but today we stood. Months passed. Brenda faded from the headlines. Her legal appeals failed. Her name became a cautionary tale in HOA conferences, a whispered lesson in what happens when power forgets its limits. But Emily's name, it was everywhere. In libraries, on bracelets, on murals. In bedtime stories, kids whispered to themselves when they needed to feel brave. And one quiet, simple evening, Rachel walked outside to water the sunflower bed and found something unexpected. A new spinner. Shiny, fresh, painted. With every color of the rainbow. No note. No signature. Just a small wooden plaque staked in the soil beneath it. It read, "For the girl who made the whole world care." We never found out who left it. Maybe a neighbor. Maybe someone we'd never even met. But in that moment, under the fading sun, it didn't matter. Because Emily had become something more than a name, more than a case file, more than a survivor. She had become a light, and no HOA rule could dim that now. It started with an email. Subject line, "Invitation to speak at the National Child Advocacy Summit, Washington, D.C." At first, I thought it was spam, another influencer trying to ride the wave of Emily's name. But then I saw the signature, Dr. Carol Enright, Director, National Office for Victims of Violence. They wanted Emily to be the closing voice of the summit. Not just a guest, not just a name on a brochure. The closing speaker. I read the email twice, then a third time, and I sat there frozen. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't know what to say. When Rachel came home, I showed her. Her reaction was different. She didn't hesitate. "She has to do this," she said. "Not for them, for her." I nodded slowly. "She's only 7. What if it's too much?" She survived a coma. She stood again when no one believed she would. She taught us how to breathe. This is just another room, and she belongs in every room now. We talked to Emily that night. She didn't say yes right away. She asked questions first. Not about the speech, not about the cameras, but about them. Will Brenda see it? I don't know, I told her. Maybe, she nodded once. Then wheeled herself to the porch. She sat there for a long time watching the spinner turn in the wind. Then softly, okay, I'll go. The flight to Washington was quiet. Emily sat by the window, watching clouds pass like thoughts she didn't want to speak. Rachel held her hand the whole way. The hotel was beautiful, expensive, paid for by the summit. The kind of place with fresh flowers in every hallway and people who called Emily ma'am. She didn't like it. Too shiny, she whispered to me. We laughed quietly and told her it was just for one night. The summit was held in a massive auditorium. Senators, mayors, CEOs, all packed into rows of suited people and tired eyes. Everyone there wanted to be seen doing the right thing. But Emily? She didn't want to be seen. She just wanted to speak. Her speech was simple, short, unscripted. She rolled herself onto the stage. The lights dimmed. And as the crowd fell silent, she looked out across the room and said one sentence that no one expected. I used to think people like me had to stay quiet. The room leaned in, but then someone hurt me, and everyone saw, and it made me want to disappear. Her voice cracked a little. But my mommy didn't let me, and my daddy stayed every night, and people I never met sent me sunflowers. There was a long pause. I don't remember everything that happened, but I remember how it felt to wake up and not be scared anymore. I'm not scared now, and I hope other kids aren't either. She lifted a small sunflower card and whispered, "This is for them." Then she wheeled back from the podium. The crowd didn't clap at first. They just stood, a wave of people rising quietly, not in applause, but in respect. And then the clapping began. Soft at first. Then louder still. Rachel covered her mouth. I cried openly. It wasn't just a speech, it was release. That night, as we sat in the hotel room watching coverage of the summit, Rachel scrolled through hundreds of tweets and headlines. One caught her eye. She didn't speak. She just turned the screen toward me. A grainy image. A woman in glasses, seated in the far back of the auditorium. The caption, "Is this Brenda Millstone?" Sources confirm she may have attended Summit anonymously. I stared at it. My chest tightened. I looked at Emily, who had fallen asleep beside her. Sunflower doll, her breathing soft and steady. Rachel whispered, "Do we tell her?" I didn't know. Part of me wanted to. Part of me wanted to wake her and say, "She saw you. She saw the girl she tried to silence." But I didn't. Because the truth was, it didn't matter. Brenda could sit in the back of 1,000 rooms. But she would never own this moment. It didn't belong to her. It belonged to the girl in the chair, who stood taller than anyone that day. Still, I couldn't sleep. The next morning, we checked out early. The flight wasn't until evening, so we took a walk around the city. Near the Lincoln Memorial, a small group of people recognized Emily. A mother approached with a boy in leg braces. She knelt down beside them. "You gave us courage," she said, holding out a sketch of a sunflower. "We wanted to give this back." Emily smiled and hugged her. It was quiet, human, pure. Then, as we walked further up the steps, I felt it. A presence. Rachel stopped. I turned slowly. There she was. Brenda, standing near the reflection pool. No sunglasses, no press, just her. Her hair was shorter, her posture slouched, her eyes sunken, darker. She looked nothing like the woman who once strutted through HOA meetings with a clipboard and an ego the size of a county. She looked small. Rachel took a breath. "I don't want a scene." "I know," I said. "We're not here for her." But Emily noticed. She didn't look scared. She didn't cry. She just wheeled herself a little closer, not all the way, just near enough. and looked directly at the woman who once tried to erase her. Brenda looked back, and then looked away. Down at the ground, shoulders hunched, mouth tight. Emily stared a moment longer, then turned to us. "Let's go." We walked away. No confrontation, no final words, because the story was already written. And Brenda? She was just a footnote. Now, back home that night, Emily asked one final question. "Do you think she came to listen, or to hide?" Rachel and I looked at each other. "I think," I said gently, "she came to remember what she can never forget." Emily didn't ask anything else. She just looked out the window and watched the sunflower spinner turn. Sunflowers bloomed across the country that year. They appeared on front lawns, wheelchair ramps, playground fences. Some were real, planted by children with shaky fingers and dirt under their nails. Some were painted, murals on school walls, and chalk drawings on sidewalks, but all of them carried the same silent promise. We saw what happened. We won't let it happen again. Emily never asked for that. She didn't want to be a symbol. She just wanted to run again. And even though her legs hadn't returned fully, her will had. Every morning, she stood with help. Every afternoon, she pushed herself across the schoolyard. And every evening, she sat in her sunflower bed with her markers and her cards, writing new messages for kids she'd never met. You are more than what they see. You're not a problem. You're a miracle. In progress. You don't need to be fixed. You need to be free. Hospitals requested more copies. Teachers read them aloud to classrooms. And one day, quietly, without warning, a senator read Emily's card into the congressional record during a disability rights vote. Rachel saw it online first. She gasped. Called me over, and together we sat in the kitchen, watching a grown man in a suit hold up a glitter-crusted card and say, "This is what leadership looks like." Emily wandered in halfway through. She tilted her head at the screen, confused. "Why is that man reading my stuff?" "Because it matters," Rachel said. "You matter." Emily rolled her eyes playfully. "Okay, but he said crayon's wrong." We laughed until we cried. It was the kind of moment we used to think we'd never have again. A moment where we could breathe, smile, live. And then came the letter. Not an email, not a text, a real letter. Cream-colored envelope, embossed seal. No return. Address inside was a folded sheet of paper. Neat, rigid handwriting. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect you to read this, but I watched the summit. I heard her speak, and I needed you to know. She changed me. I will never deserve what I took from her. But if I have a soul left, it's because she woke it up. I'm sorry. There was no signature. We didn't need one. I read it once, then slid it back into the envelope. Rachel didn't ask to see it. She didn't need to. We burned it in the fireplace that night, not out of hatred, but because it didn't belong to us anymore. It was smoke, and smoke belongs to the wind. Months passed. Emily grew stronger. The doctor stopped using the word miracle and started using statistical anomaly. We just called her ours. Mr. Alvarez visited often. He helped us build a community ramp for another family down the block. His wife eventually joined him. Quiet at first, but helpful. She brought casseroles, sat beside Rachel one afternoon and whispered, "I should have said something sooner." Rachel didn't reply. She just put a hand over hers. Some silences. Don't need words to break. One day, a little boy from the neighborhood tripped over his bike and scraped his knees on the sidewalk. His mother ran to him, panicked. He stood up, brushed himself off, and said, "It's okay. I'm gonna be like Emily. She gets back up." We heard it from the porch, and none of us could speak for a long time. The HOA was never rebuilt. No one wanted it. What replaced it was something better. A neighborhood council made up of parents, teachers, volunteers, and children who attended the meetings with crayons and construction paper. The first rule they passed wasn't about lawn height or paint color. It was this: all families are welcome here. 3 months later, the council voted to rename the community park. They called it Sunflower Square. Emily didn't want a ceremony. She didn't want cameras or speeches, but she agreed to visit. So we went, just our family, on a cloudy morning. Just before the new sign went up, she rolled to the center of the grass. Looked around. Quiet. "Do you remember when she said I didn't belong here?" she asked. I nodded. "Well," she said, "I think I do now." We sat there for a while, watching the wind move the trees, watching the spinner she'd made with. Her class catched the light, and that's when she said it. "I want to help more people." "Like how?" I asked. She thought. "Maybe I could make more cards, or read to kids who feel scared, or... I don't know. Maybe I could be a teacher one day." Rachel smiled. "You'd be a good one." Emily grinned. "I'd let them have snacks in class." And for some reason, that broke me. Because after everything, the coma, the courtroom, the hate, the headlines, she still believed the world deserved kindness, and she still believed she had something to give. That night, I sat alone on the porch. The wind was warm, the spinner twirled, and I thought about everything we'd been through. How we once believed HOA rules were the enemy, but really, it was indifference. It was fear. It was the belief that control mattered, more than compassion. And what destroyed that belief wasn't vengeance. It was a little girl in a wheelchair who smiled when the wind blew just right. A girl who forgave a monster so she wouldn't carry her weight. A girl who turned silence into sunlight and trauma into teaching. And somehow, through all the pain, all the noise, all the grief, she had become a garden. That's when I realized the truth I'd been chasing for so long. Justice doesn't always wear a badge. Sometimes it wears stickers. Sometimes it rolls into rooms people once tried to keep closed. Sometimes it wears a crown of gauze and smiles like nothing can break it. And sometimes justice is just a little girl whispering to the world, "You didn't stop me."